Rain has a way of making everything feel farther away. Voices sound distant. Colors fade. Even memories seem harder to hold on to. As I stood beside my wife's grave that afternoon, I couldn't tell whether the water on my face was rain or tears anymore. 45 years. 45 years with Ivonne. And now all I had left was a polished oak coffin disappearing beneath wet Georgia soil. The minister was still talking. People were still standing around me. But I barely heard any of it. My world had gone silent. A cold wind pushed through the cemetery. Umbrellas shifted. Cars started pulling away. The funeral was ending. And for the first time since I was 28 years old, I was completely alone. I stared down at the fresh dirt. My hands trembled. Not from age. From fear. People think losing your wife at 73 is easier because you've had a long life together. That's nonsense. The longer someone stays beside you, the more impossible it becomes to imagine the world without them. I felt a hand touch my shoulder. It was my son, Terence. 42 years old. Brilliant. Successful. Kind. The best thing Ivonne and I ever created. Dad? His voice cracked. You okay? No. I wasn't okay. But fathers lie. Even old fathers. I forced a smile. I'll survive. Terence nodded. But his eyes looked exhausted. Not grieving. Distracted. That bothered me. I couldn't explain why. Just a feeling. A tiny splinter in the back of my mind. Then I heard it. Click. 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 High heels. Slow. Confident. Approaching from behind. I turned. Savannah. My daughter-in-law. Perfect black dress. Perfect makeup. Perfect posture. Not a single sign she'd attended a funeral. For a moment I expected sympathy. Maybe a hug. Maybe a kind word. Something. Anything. Instead she looked at her watch. Actually looked at her watch. Then sighed. The way someone sighs when they're stuck in traffic. Warren. No warmth. No sadness. Nothing. Just annoyance. We need to discuss your living situation. Terence looked surprised. Savannah. But she kept going. Now that Ivonne is gone, the house is too much responsibility. I stared at her. Not understanding. She continued. We found an assisted living facility. The cemetery suddenly felt colder. What? She folded her arms. It's affordable. Affordable. At my wife's funeral. My fingers curled into fists. Terence blinked. What are you talking about? Savannah smiled. That smile. The one she'd perfected over years. The smile that looked pleasant until you studied her eyes. Then you noticed the absence of warmth. We discussed this already? Terence frowned. No. We didn't. Something flashed across her face. Gone in an instant. But I saw it. Anger. Just for a second. Then the mask returned. She placed a hand on his arm. We'll talk later. The way she said it wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. Terence immediately fell silent. And that bothered me even more. Because my son never used to be silent around anyone. Especially not his wife. Savannah turned back toward me. The movers come Monday. Then she walked away. Just like that. Leaving me standing beside my wife's grave. As if she had merely reminded me about a dentist appointment. I watched her disappear toward the parking lot. Something felt wrong. Not rude. Not insensitive. Wrong. Like a puzzle piece shoved into the wrong place. Victor appeared beside me. My neighbor of 30 years. Retired Marine. Biggest gossip in Atlanta. He watched Savannah leave. Then whistled. That woman sure doesn't waste time. I forced a laugh. But Victor wasn't smiling. He was watching her. Studying her. The same way a hunter studies movement in the woods. You okay, Warren? I looked back at the grave. No. Victor nodded slowly, as if he'd expected that answer. Then he reached into his jacket, pulled out a small envelope, and handed it to me. My name was written across the front, in Yvonne's handwriting. The sight of it nearly broke me. My hands shook. "What's this?" Victor hesitated. For the first time in 30 years. Victor looked nervous. "Yvonne gave me that 6 months ago." My heart skipped. "What?" He swallowed. "Told me if anything happened to her." He glanced toward Savannah's car. "I was supposed to wait until after the funeral." The rain suddenly seemed louder. "What is it?" Victor looked me directly in the eyes. "I don't know." Then he lowered his voice. "But whatever your wife was doing these last 2 years," he said, "she was terrified." My stomach dropped. Terrified? Yvonne? That wasn't possible. My wife wasn't afraid of anything. Not cancer. Not hospitals. Not death. Nothing. Victor stepped closer. "There was one more thing." "What?" He pointed toward the envelope. "She said after you read it." His voice became almost a whisper. "You need to come with me immediately." A chill crawled down my spine. I looked down at the envelope, then back toward Savannah, who was now standing beside her car, watching us. Watching very carefully. And suddenly, for the first time that day, my grief wasn't the strongest feeling in my chest anymore. Curiosity was. Because somehow, my dead wife had just sent me a message from beyond the grave. And deep down, I already knew my life was about to change. The rain hadn't stopped. It followed me all the way from the graveside to Victor's truck. Neither of us spoke. I sat there staring at the envelope in my lap while water rolled down the windshield. My wife's handwriting. The same handwriting that used to leave notes in my lunchbox. The same handwriting that signed every anniversary card. The same handwriting that now felt like a message from another world. For a long moment, I couldn't bring myself to open it. Because once I did, there would be no pretending she was still here. Victor cleared his throat. "Warren." I looked up. "You need to read it." I nodded. Slowly. Then slid my finger beneath the seal. Inside were only 3 things. A small brass key. A folded piece of paper. And a photograph. The photo hit me first. It was Savannah, standing outside a downtown office building. Nothing unusual about that. Except she wasn't alone. A tall man stood beside her. Expensive suit. Silver watch. Arm around her waist. Not exactly how a business partner stands. Not how a married woman stands either. I stared. Confused. Then unfolded the note. My heart nearly stopped. "Warren, if you're reading this, I didn't make it. Listen carefully. Do not confront Savannah. Do not tell Terrence what you found. Trust no one until you know who is involved. The key opens Warehouse 14 on River Industrial Road. Everything begins there. And Warren, if Savannah knows you're reading this, you're already in danger. Yvonne." I read it twice. Then a third time. The words didn't make sense. Danger? From Savannah? The same woman who brought sweet potato pie every Thanksgiving? The same woman who called me Dad? No. Something wasn't adding up. Victor started the truck. "We should go." I folded the note carefully. My hands felt numb. "Did she ever tell you what this was about?" Victor shook his head. "No. You never asked?" "I did." He gave a humorless laugh. "Your wife told me to mind my own business." That sounded like Yvonne. Even cancer never changed that stubborn streak. The truck rolled onto the road. Atlanta blurred past through sheets of rain. But something kept bothering me. One question. One detail. Something I couldn't stop thinking about. Finally, I looked at Victor. "When did she give you this?" "About 6 months ago." 6 months. My stomach tightened. 6 months earlier, Yvonne had been in chemotherapy. Weak. exhausted, barely sleeping. Yet somehow she'd organized secret instructions, prepared for her own death, and never told me. Why? The question sat heavy in my chest. The farther we drove, the worse the feeling became. Because the truth was, I knew my wife. Or at least I thought I did. Ivonne never hid things from me. Not important things. Not life-changing things. Certainly not things involving our son. Yet somehow she'd managed to keep an entire operation secret. For years. That realization hurt almost as much as losing her. Because suddenly I wasn't only grieving. I was questioning everything. 40 minutes later we left the city behind. The buildings became warehouses. The warehouses became empty lots. Then even those disappeared. Eventually Victor turned onto a cracked industrial road. Weeds pushed through broken pavement. Rusting fences lined both sides. The place looked forgotten. Like the world had abandoned it years ago. At the end of the road stood a massive warehouse. Dark. Silent. Empty. Or at least it appeared empty. Victor parked. Killed the engine. Neither of us moved. The building sat there in the rain like some sleeping giant. Waiting. You sure about this? Victor asked. No. Good. I looked at him. What? He nodded toward the warehouse. Means you're thinking. Then he handed me a flashlight. I climbed out. Rain soaked my jacket instantly. The warehouse door stood 20 yards away. Each step felt heavier than the last. The brass key felt cold in my pocket. For some reason, my heart was pounding. Not fear. Instinct. The same instinct I'd learned to trust decades earlier. The instinct that whispered, something big is hiding here. I reached the door. Inserted the key. Turned it. Click. The lock opened. For a moment I just stood there. Listening. Nothing. Only rain. Only silence. Then I pulled the door open. The darkness inside swallowed the light. I found a switch beside the entrance. Flipped it. And froze. My breath vanished. Every thought disappeared. For several seconds I simply stared. Unable to process what I was seeing. Because the warehouse wasn't empty. Not even close. It was alive. Walls covered in photographs. Tables stacked with files. Maps. Financial records. Laptops. Folders. Screenshots. Receipts. Bank statements. Everything connected by strings and notes. A massive investigation. Years of work. Hundreds. Maybe thousands of hours. And right in the center, a giant photograph of Savannah. I felt my knees weaken. Victor stepped inside behind me. Then stopped. My God! Neither of us spoke. The entire warehouse looked like something from a federal task force. Like a criminal conspiracy board. Like an operation built to take down a major organization. Except there was only one target. Savannah. My daughter-in-law. Rain hammered the roof overhead. Somewhere water dripped. The sound echoed through the building. I slowly walked toward the center, trying to make sense of it. Everywhere I looked there were dates. Transactions. Phone numbers. Property records. Travel logs. Photographs. Some recent. Some years old. The deeper I looked, the stranger it became. Because Savannah wasn't just connected to one person. She was connected to dozens. Investors. Lawyers. Accountants. Corporate executives. Political donors. A web. An enormous web. And at the center of it all was my son's name. Terrence. I felt a chill. What the hell were you doing, Ivonne? The answer came seconds later. Sitting on the central table. A small digital recorder. With a piece of tape attached. 3 handwritten words. For Warren only. My chest tightened. Victor noticed it too. I'll wait outside. I nodded. He quietly left. The door closed. Leaving me alone. alone with whatever my wife wanted me to know. I picked up the recorder. My thumb hovered over the play button. Suddenly I wasn't sure I wanted to hear it. Because once I did, there would be no going back. Whatever secret Ivonne had carried into the grave, it was about to become mine. I closed my eyes, took a breath, and pressed play. Static crackled. Then came a voice. Weak. Tired. But unmistakable. My wife's. Warren! The sound of her voice hit me like a punch to the chest. For a second I couldn't breathe. Tears instantly filled my eyes. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. Something so shocking. I actually looked around the warehouse to make sure I'd heard correctly. Because the first sentence out of Yvonne's mouth was, "Savannah is not who she says she is." And that wasn't even the worst part. The warehouse suddenly felt colder. Not physically. The kind of cold that settles deep inside your chest when reality starts shifting beneath your feet. I stared at the recorder. My wife's voice crackled through the tiny speaker. Weak from cancer. But steady. Focused. Determined. The voice of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. And exactly how dangerous it was. Warren, if you're hearing this, it means I ran out of time. My throat tightened. Even now, she sounded more concerned about everyone else than herself. That was Ivonne. Always protecting somebody. Always carrying burdens she never deserved. The recording continued. "I know what you're thinking." A faint cough interrupted her. Then silence. For a moment I wondered if the recording had ended. Then she spoke again. "You're thinking I've lost my mind." A sad laugh escaped her. "I wish that were true." I swallowed hard. Because she knew me. Even after death. She knew exactly what I'd be thinking. Exactly what I'd be struggling to believe. "Listen carefully, Warren." The tone of her voice changed. More serious now. Less emotional. Almost tactical. The way she'd sound whenever our family faced a crisis. "I didn't start investigating Savannah because I disliked her." I looked around the warehouse. The mountains of evidence. The years of work. The obsession? No. People don't build something like this because they dislike someone. They build it because they're terrified. And that's exactly what I was beginning to feel. Terrified. 5 years ago, Ivonne said, "I found something by accident." I leaned closer. 5 years. Long before her cancer diagnosis. Long before anyone suspected anything was wrong. "Do you remember the fundraiser at the Ritz?" I did. Terrence had won a major medical innovation award. We'd all attended. Savannah wore a red dress. Terrence couldn't stop smiling. One of the proudest nights of his life. "I met a woman there." The recorder crackled. "Her name was Diane Holloway." The name meant nothing to me. But Yvonne's next words did. "She recognized Savannah immediately." A knot formed in my stomach. "Not as Savannah Mitchell." Silence. Then, "As Melissa Crane." I blinked. "What?" My wife continued. "At first I thought Diane was mistaken." I did too. People confuse faces all the time. Especially at crowded events. Especially after a few drinks. But Ivonne wasn't finished. Diane wasn't confused. The warehouse seemed quieter now. Every drop of rain outside sounded louder. Every breath felt heavier. "She showed me photographs." My pulse quickened. "Old photographs." I walked closer to Savannah's giant picture hanging in the center of the room. Studying it. Looking for something I'd somehow missed all these years. Different hair color. Pause. Different last name. Pause. Same woman. My stomach sank. No. No, that couldn't be right. People don't just become different people. Not in real life. Not outside movies. Yet a tiny voice in the back of my mind whispered something uncomfortable. How much did I actually know about Savannah before she met Terrence? Not much. Almost nothing, actually. She'd appeared in our lives 12 years earlier. Smart. Charming. Beautiful. Successful. Everyone liked her. Everyone trusted her. And maybe that was the problem. Because nobody had ever looked deeper. Including me. Especially me. The recording continued. Diane told me a story. My chest tightened. And somehow I already knew I wasn't going to like it. According to Diane, years before meeting Terrence, Savannah had lived in North Carolina. Back then she'd used another name. Melissa Crane. She'd married into a wealthy family. Not incredibly wealthy. But comfortable. Enough money to attract attention. Enough assets to matter. The family patriarch was a retired contractor named Harold Bennett. 78 years old. Widower. Respected in his community. Healthy. Independent. Strong. Then everything changed. Within 18 months of Melissa entering the family, Harold's finances began shifting. Properties transferred. Accounts consolidated. Legal documents updated. Medical evaluations requested. The changes were subtle. Small enough to avoid attention. Large enough to matter. The kind of pattern most people never notice. But I noticed. Because decades earlier, those were exactly the patterns I was trained to spot. I felt a familiar sensation stirring inside me. Something old. Something buried. The bloodhound. Still asleep. But moving. Just slightly. Ivonne continued. 6 months later, Harold was declared mentally unfit. I clenched my jaw. No. Not mentally unfit. That phrase never appears alone. It appears when someone benefits. Someone profits. Someone gains control. The next sentence confirmed it. Melissa received power of attorney. The warehouse felt smaller. Like the walls were moving closer. I already knew where this story was going. But I prayed I was wrong. Then came the worst part. 3 months later, Harold died. Silence. Just static. Just rain. Just my own heartbeat. Then, the death was ruled natural causes. I closed my eyes. Natural causes. The two most dangerous words in any investigation. Because sometimes they're true. And sometimes they're convenient. The difference usually depends on who asks questions. And apparently, nobody had. Until Diane. The recording clicked. Then Yvonne's voice returned. Softer now. Sadder. I wanted to dismiss it. I understood that. I desperately wanted to dismiss it too. Because if this was true, then my family had been living beside a predator for over a decade. And none of us had noticed. Not me. Not Terrence. Not anyone. But the evidence surrounding me said otherwise. A mountain of evidence. Built by the one person I trusted most. I spent 6 months trying to prove Diane wrong. That sounded exactly like Yvonne. Fair. Patient. Careful. Never rushing to judgment. Never accusing without proof. Which made what came next even more frightening. Because when Yvonne finally spoke again, her voice was shaking. Not with fear. With certainty. I couldn't prove Diane wrong. My chest tightened. Instead, I discovered something worse. The warehouse suddenly seemed silent. Completely silent. Even the rain. Even the dripping water. Everything. I waited. My heart pounding. Then the recording delivered another blow. Diane Holloway disappeared 3 years ago. My eyes widened. Disappeared? What? The word escaped my mouth before I realized I'd spoken aloud. Yvonne continued. No body. Pause. No explanation. Pause. No answers? I stared into space. Trying to process it. Trying to convince myself this was coincidence. Trying to convince myself it meant nothing. But another voice inside me had already started connecting pieces. A voice I hadn't heard in 25 years. A voice that never cared about comfort. Only truth. The bloodhound. And the bloodhound hated coincidences. Then the recording changed. Again. This time Ivonne sounded frightened. Actually frightened. For the first time. Warren! A long pause. If you're still listening, I need you to understand something. I leaned closer. Every muscle in my body tense. I don't think Savannah is working alone. My pulse jumped. Not alone? What did that mean? The answer came immediately. I believe someone is helping her. The recorder crackled. Then, someone with money. Pause. Someone powerful. Pause. Someone connected to Terrence's patent. My stomach dropped. Terrence. The patent. His life's work. The medical technology he'd spent 8 years developing. The invention that could change everything. Not just for him. For millions of people. And suddenly I understood. This wasn't about a house. This wasn't about inheritance. This wasn't about me. Not really. I was just an obstacle. The real target had always been Terrence. His future. His company. His patent. Everything he'd built. Everything Ivonne died trying to protect. Then the recording reached its end. And Ivonne said 6 words that sent ice through my veins. Words that changed everything. Words that transformed suspicion into certainty. Words that woke the bloodhound completely. She whispered, "Check the hospital records from March 14th. Then the recording stopped. Just like that. Silence. Dead silence. I stood frozen in the middle of the warehouse. Because March 14th wasn't just a random date. I knew exactly what happened on March 14th. It was the day doctors told us Yvonne's cancer had suddenly become much more aggressive. The day her condition mysteriously worsened. The day her decline accelerated. The day everything changed. And for the first time, a horrifying question entered my mind. A question I didn't want to ask. A question I was terrified to answer. What if my wife wasn't investigating her own killer? What if she already knew who it was? For several seconds I couldn't move. The recorder sat silent in my hand. My wife's final words echoed through the warehouse. Check the hospital records from March 14th. I didn't want to. God help me, I didn't want to. Because deep down I already knew something. The moment a person starts searching for answers, they risk finding them. And some answers change you forever. I slowly turned toward the table. Toward the folder. The one sitting by itself. The one Ivonne had clearly intended me to find. A white label stretched across the front. The handwriting was hers. Steady. Careful. Deliberate. March 14th. Do not open until you hear the recording. My chest tightened. Even now, she was guiding the investigation step by step. Like she knew exactly how I'd react. Like she'd planned every move long before she died. I sat down. Took a deep breath. And opened the folder. The first photograph nearly stopped my heart. It showed the oncology floor at St. Mark's Hospital. The timestamp sat in the corner. March 13th, 11:47 p.m. A security camera image. Grainy. Black and white. But clear enough. A woman stood outside Yvonne's room. Her face partially turned away. Designer coat. High heels. Long dark hair. My stomach dropped. Savannah. There was no question. No doubt. It was her. I flipped to the next photograph. Same hallway. Different angle. Different timestamp. 11:53 p.m. Savannah entering Yvonne's room. Alone. No nurse. No doctor. No family member. Just Savannah. The next photo. 12:26 a.m. Savannah leaving. Looking over her shoulder. Checking the hallway. The look on her face made my skin crawl. Not grief. Not concern. Not affection. Caution. The kind of caution people show when they don't want witnesses. I stared at the image. Trying to understand. Trying to find another explanation. Maybe she'd simply visited. Maybe she couldn't sleep. Maybe. Then I saw the report beneath the photos. A hospital incident summary. Official. Stamped. Signed. And highlighted in yellow. My hands trembled as I read. Patient experienced severe complications approximately 6 hours after unauthorized visitor access. Unauthorized visitor. I read the sentence again. Then again. A cold pressure settled in my chest. Because Savannah wasn't supposed to be there. She wasn't on the visitor list. She hadn't signed in. She hadn't received permission. According to the report. The hospital never knew she was there. I flipped the page. More notes. More details. The deeper I read, the worse it became. A medication discrepancy. A missing vial. An unexplained chart entry. 3 different nurses interviewed. None remembered authorizing Savannah's visit. None remembered seeing her leave. It was as if she had slipped into the building like a ghost. Then disappeared. The final page contained a handwritten note from Ivonne. Only one sentence. This is where I stopped believing in coincidences. I closed my eyes. My wife had spent 2 years gathering evidence. 2 years. That meant she'd reached this conclusion long before she died. Long before she recorded those messages. Long before she gave Victor the envelope. Which meant she'd been carrying this burden alone. And suddenly, I wasn't just grieving anymore. I was angry. Furiously angry. Because while I sat beside her hospital bed telling her everything would be okay, she had been quietly preparing for war. And she hadn't wanted me involved. Not because she didn't trust me. Because she was trying to protect me. Even now. Even after death. She was still protecting me. The warehouse door creaked open. I nearly jumped. Victor stepped inside. One look at my face and his expression changed. What did you find? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I handed him the photograph. He studied it. His jaw tightened. That's Savannah. Yeah. What time was this taken? Almost midnight. Victor looked back at me. Either of us said it. We didn't need to. The implication hung in the air between us. Heavy. Dangerous. Ugly. Finally he exhaled. Damn. That single word carried enough weight for both of us. I stood. Walked toward the giant evidence board. The closer I looked, the more details emerged. Notes. Connections. Timelines. Dozens of names. Some circled. Some crossed out. Some linked to bank accounts. Others linked to shell companies. And one name appeared over and over again. Preston Vale. I frowned. The name sounded familiar. Very familiar. I searched my memory. Then it hit me. Preston Vale. The venture capitalist. The tech investor. The man constantly appearing on local business magazines. The guy who bragged about turning startups into billion-dollar companies. I remembered seeing him shake Terrence's hand at a conference. Years ago. Back when the patent was still being developed. My pulse quickened. Why was his name everywhere? I followed the red strings. Savannah connected to Preston. Preston connected to several law firms. The law firms connected to shell companies. The shell companies connected to accounts. The accounts connected to Terrence. My blood ran cold. Not directly. Indirectly. Hidden. Layered. Complicated. Exactly how professionals move money. Exactly how sophisticated fraud works. Exactly how someone hides theft. I felt something old beginning to return. The analytical part of my brain. The part I'd buried decades earlier. Patterns. Relationships. Motives. Suddenly the board wasn't chaos anymore. It was speaking. And what it was saying terrified me. Because this wasn't a family dispute. It wasn't even a scam. It was a coordinated operation. And Terrence was standing directly in the middle of it. Without realizing it. Victor was watching me carefully. You seeing something? I nodded slowly. Yeah. What? I stared at Preston's photograph. The expensive suit. The confident smile. The eyes. Those eyes bothered me. I've spent years studying liars. Fraudsters. Criminals. People who believed they were smarter than everyone else. Eventually, they all developed the same look. Confidence without humility. Charm without warmth. And Preston had it. Bad. I pointed at his picture. This man isn't helping Savannah. Victor frowned. What do you mean? I kept staring. Following connections. Reviewing notes. Reviewing dates. Reviewing transactions. The answer became obvious. She's helping him. Victor looked confused. Then his eyes widened. Oh. Exactly. A predator doesn't usually work for another predator. One eventually becomes prey. And judging by the evidence, Preston wasn't following Savannah's orders. Savannah was following his. Which meant the situation was bigger than we'd assumed. Much bigger. Then I saw something that made my stomach drop. A calendar. Pinned near the center board. One date circled repeatedly. Highlighted in red. Underlined 3 times. Only 5 days away. I stepped closer. Read the note beneath it. And felt my heartbeat accelerate. Atlanta Innovation Gala. 5 days. Terrence's company was scheduled to unveil its final patent presentation. 5 days. Investors. Media. Corporate partners. Everyone important would be there. 5 days. And according to Yvonne's notes, that was when the theft would happen. Not months later. Not someday. 5 days. The countdown had already started. And my wife had known it. Which explained why she'd been racing against time. Why she'd worked while undergoing chemotherapy. Why she'd built this entire operation. She wasn't trying to expose Savannah eventually. She was trying to stop something specific. Something imminent. Something irreversible. And now she was gone. Meaning the responsibility had become mine. Whether I wanted it or not. I looked around the warehouse one last time. At the evidence. At the photographs. At the years of sacrifice. At the work my wife had left behind. Then I made a decision. A dangerous one. The kind of decision that changes everything afterward. I wasn't going to call the police. Not yet. I wasn't going to confront Savannah. And I definitely wasn't going to warn Terrence. Because if Yvonne had taught me anything, it was this. Never alert a target before you know the entire game. Especially when you don't know how many players are sitting at the table. I looked at Victor. I need a computer. Victor raised an eyebrow. For what? For the first time in 25 years. I felt the old instincts fully return. The bloodhound wasn't retired anymore. Not tonight. I picked up a folder labeled Preston Vale Financials and smiled. A very different smile than the one I'd worn at the funeral. The smile of a man who had finally found a trail. And intended to follow it all the way to the end. Because, I said quietly, I want to know who's really paying for this. Victor stared at me for a second. Then slowly grinned. The kind of grin soldiers get when they recognize a fight is coming. And somewhere across Atlanta, Savannah was probably celebrating. Probably convinced her biggest obstacle was gone. Probably convinced an old widower was sitting at home crying into a cup of coffee. She had no idea what she just unleashed. And she was about to make a mistake. A very big mistake. Because less than an hour later, my phone lit up with a message from Terrence. A message that made every alarm bell in my head start screaming. It contained only 8 words. Dad, Savannah says you threatened her today. We need to talk immediately. I stared at the text message for a long time. 8 simple words. Yet somehow they felt heavier than everything I'd found inside the warehouse. Dad, Savannah says you threatened her today. We need to talk immediately. I read it again. Then again. Threatened her? At the funeral? I hadn't even raised my voice. The only conversation we'd had lasted less than 30 seconds. And now she was already rewriting reality. Fast. Too fast. That alone told me something important. Savannah was nervous. People who are winning don't usually rush. They don't panic. They don't start creating stories before anyone asks questions. They wait. Savannah wasn't waiting. Which meant she was afraid of something. Or someone. Maybe Ivonne had gotten closer to the truth than Savannah ever realized. Victor leaned over my shoulder. "What is it?" I handed him the phone. He read the message. Then muttered something that would have made a church choir blush. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I sat down and looked at the giant evidence board again. For the first time, I wasn't seeing Savannah. I was seeing Terrence. My son. The real victim in all of this. And suddenly I understood why Ivonne never told him. Because evidence isn't enough when love is involved. Especially not romantic love. People don't see clearly when their heart is invested. They explain things away. Ignore warning signs. Defend behavior they'd condemn in anyone else. Terrence wasn't stupid. Far from it. But he loved his wife. And love can blind even the smartest person in the room. I knew. Because I'd spent 45 years loving Ivonne. My phone vibrated again. This time it was a voicemail. "Savannah." "Of course." I hesitated. Then pressed play. Immediately her voice filled the warehouse. Soft. Shaky. Almost crying. An Oscar-worthy performance. Pause. "But what happened today frightened me." I closed my eyes. "Here we go. You grabbed my arm." "Lie." "You threatened me." "Lie." "You said I'd regret forcing you to leave the house." "Lie." 3 lies in 10 seconds. Efficient. Professional. Practiced. Then came the masterstroke. The one designed specifically for Terrence. "I don't want your son caught in the middle of this." Victor rolled his eyes. I nearly did the same. Because that's exactly what manipulators say when they're dragging someone into the middle. The message ended with one final line. "I forgive you." Click. Silence. Victor stared at me. "You know," he said. "I officially hate that woman." I nodded. The scary part wasn't the lies. The scary part was how convincing they sounded. If I didn't know better, I might have believed her myself. An hour later, I was sitting alone in my study. The house felt wrong without Ivonne. Too quiet. Too empty. Every room carried memories. The kitchen where she danced while cooking. The couch where we'd watched old movies. The chair beside mine where she'd sit reading mystery novels. Now there was only silence. And grief. Grief has a strange way of sneaking up on you. One minute you're investigating criminal conspiracies. The next you're staring at an empty coffee mug trying not to cry. I found one of her sweaters draped over the chair. For a second I picked it up. Pressed it against my face. Her perfume was still there. Faint. Almost gone. That nearly broke me. Because suddenly none of the evidence mattered. None of the investigations mattered. None of the conspiracies mattered. I wanted my wife back. That's all. Just one more conversation. One more breakfast together. One more chance to tell her I loved her. The tears came hard. Harder than they had at the funeral. I sat there alone. Crying like a child. And for the first time since her death, I let myself fall apart. No witnesses. No pride. No pretending. Just grief. Raw and ugly. The kind grief leaves behind when love was real. An hour later, someone knocked on my front door. 3 sharp knocks. I already knew who it was. Terrence. I opened the door. The moment I saw him, my heart sank. He looked exhausted. Not angry. Conflicted. Which was somehow worse. Because it meant Savannah had already planted doubt. "Dad? Son?" Neither of us moved. Finally he stepped inside. The house felt tense immediately. Like a storm waiting to break. He sat across from me at the dining room table. The same table where he'd done homework as a kid. The same table where Ivonne taught him multiplication. The same table where we'd celebrated birthdays. Tonight it felt like a courtroom. Terence folded his hands. I need to ask you something. I nodded. Okay. His eyes searched mine. Looking for truth. Looking for reassurance. Looking for something. Did you threaten Savannah? There it was. The question. Simple. Direct. Dangerous. For a moment I considered telling him everything. The warehouse. The evidence. The recordings. The investigation. All of it. But Yvonne's instructions echoed in my head. Do not tell Terence yet. I hated it. But she had a reason. And I trusted her. Even now. Especially now. So I answered honestly. No. Terence studied me. You didn't grab her? No. You didn't threaten her? No. Silence. A long silence. Then he sighed. Relief flickered across his face. Just for a second. And that told me something important. He wanted to believe me. Good. That meant Savannah hadn't fully poisoned him yet. Not completely. Then Terence said something unexpected. Something that changed the entire conversation. That's what I thought. I blinked. What? He rubbed his forehead. None of it sounded like you. Interesting. Very interesting. The bloodhound inside me immediately took note. Because Savannah had expected him to believe her. Yet here he was. Questioning the story. Which meant cracks already existed in their marriage. Cracks Savannah didn't know I could see. Then Terence leaned forward. Lowering his voice. Dad? His eyes moved toward the windows. Then toward the hallway. Checking. Making sure nobody else was listening. My pulse quickened. What's wrong? He hesitated. For several seconds. Long enough to tell me this wasn't easy. Then he said, something feels off. I remained silent. Letting him continue. About Savannah. There it was. The first crack. The first opening. The first sign Yvonne hadn't been alone. Terence looked exhausted. Like he'd been carrying something for months. Maybe longer. I can't explain it. He shook his head. She's different. Different. One word. But loaded with meaning. I kept listening. She checks my emails now. My stomach tightened. She asks about every meeting. Pause. Every phone call. Pause. Every business decision. Pause. And lately. He stopped. His jaw tightened. Lately she's become obsessed with the patent. There it was. The patent. Always the patent. Every road seemed to lead back to it. Every clue. Every lie. Every manipulation. Terence looked down at the table. I don't know, Dad. His voice was quiet now. Almost ashamed. But sometimes I feel like she's hiding something. My pulse accelerated. Because this was the moment. The exact moment predators fear. The moment their victim begins questioning reality. Not enough to escape. But enough to notice. And once someone starts noticing, the mask becomes harder to maintain. Then my phone buzzed. A text message. Unknown number. No name attached. Only a photo. Nothing else. No words. No explanation. Just a photograph. I opened it. And immediately felt the blood drain from my face. Because the picture showed Savannah. Standing in a parking garage. Speaking to Preston Vale. Taken only 30 minutes earlier. But that wasn't what shocked me. What shocked me was what they were holding. A thick manila folder. And printed across the front in bold black letters were two words. Terence Mitchell. Misspelled. Terence's name. His file. His future. His life. Being handed from one conspirator to another. And written across the bottom in red marker. Was a date. A date only 3 days away. The date of the Atlanta Innovation Gala. The date Ivonne had circled on the evidence board. The date everything was supposed to happen. And suddenly one thing became crystal clear. We weren't early. We were late. The operation was already underway. For a moment, neither Terence nor I spoke. The second message sat on my screen like a live grenade. Your wife found more than she realized. No name. No number. No explanation. Then came the video file. My pulse immediately accelerated. Who sent it? Why now? And how did they know I was looking? Because that was the question that wouldn't leave me alone. The timing was impossible. Only a handful of people even knew I had gone to the warehouse. Victor. Me. And whoever had built this trap. Terence noticed my expression. Dad? I quickly locked the phone. Nothing. The lie felt ugly. But I wasn't ready. Not yet. Not until I knew what I was dealing with. Terence stood. I should go. He looked exhausted. The last few months had clearly taken a toll. Dark circles under his eyes. Weight loss. Constant tension in his shoulders. The kind of stress that slowly changes a person. I suddenly wondered how long Savannah had been tightening her grip around his life. Months? Years? Long enough that he couldn't even recognize it happening? Before leaving, he stopped at the door. Then turned back. Dad? Yeah? His voice dropped. If you find out anything. He hesitated. Anything. Not everything. Anything. That choice of words mattered. A lot. Tell me. I nodded. I will. It wasn't entirely true. But it wasn't entirely false either. The moment he left, I locked the front door. Closed every curtain. Turned off every light except the lamp beside my chair. Then I opened the video. My stomach tightened immediately. Security footage. Hospital footage. Black and white. Timestamped. March 13th, 11:58 p.m. The night before Yvonne's sudden decline. The same night Savannah secretly entered her room. I pressed play. The camera angle overlooked a side hallway. Not the main corridor. A secondary route. The kind visitors rarely use. The footage rolled silently. Empty hallway. Nothing. Then movement appeared. A figure. Female. Savannah. No surprise there. She walked quickly, looking over her shoulder twice. Nervous. Anxious. Checking whether anyone was watching. Then she disappeared through a side door. I frowned. That wasn't Yvonne's room. According to the floor plan I'd seen in the warehouse. That hallway led somewhere else. The pharmacy storage area. Interesting. Very interesting. I kept watching. 2 minutes passed. Then Savannah emerged again. Only this time. She wasn't alone. My heart nearly stopped. A man walked beside her. Tall. Broad shoulders. Medical scrubs. Face partially obscured. The footage quality was poor. But one thing was obvious. The man wasn't hospital staff. Not officially. Because real employees don't spend their shifts hiding from security cameras. And they definitely don't sneak through side corridors at midnight. The pair spoke briefly. Then separated. Savannah headed toward Yvonne's room. The man headed the opposite direction. The video ended. I stared at the frozen screen, trying to process what I'd just seen. Because everything had changed. Until now I'd assumed Savannah acted alone. Now I knew she didn't. Someone inside that hospital had helped her. Or at least worked with her. Which meant the conspiracy reached farther than we'd realized. Much farther. My phone vibrated. Victor. I answered immediately. You need to see something, he said. His voice sounded tense. Very tense. What happened? I've been going through the warehouse files. A pause. Then, there's another board. I sat upright. What? A hidden room. My pulse jumped. A hidden room? Why didn't you mention that earlier? Because I just found it. Fair enough. The warehouse was enormous. Still, a hidden room changed things. A lot. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The drive felt longer than before. Atlanta's streets glistened beneath streetlights. Rain continued falling. Not hard. Just enough to make everything look lonely. The city felt different now. Darker somehow. Like secrets were hiding in every building. Every shadow. Every passing car. By the time I reached the warehouse, Victor was waiting outside. His face told me everything. Whatever he'd found. It was bad. Very bad. Without a word he led me inside. Past the evidence boards. Past the filing cabinets. Past the main investigation area. Toward the back wall. A section I'd barely noticed earlier. Victor pulled a shelf aside. A hidden door appeared. My stomach tightened. You're kidding. He shook his head. I wish. The room beyond was small. Maybe 15 feet wide. No windows. No decorations. Just files. Boxes. And another investigation board. Larger than the first. Much larger. The moment I saw it, my blood ran cold. Because Savannah wasn't at the center. Preston wasn't at the center. Terrence wasn't at the center. I was. My photograph occupied the middle of the board, surrounded by notes, timelines, financial records, personal information, every detail of my life. I stepped closer, unable to believe what I was seeing. Retirement accounts, medical records, property documents, even photographs of me sitting on my own porch. Someone had been watching me. For a long time. Years, judging by the dates. Years. Victor looked just as disturbed. What kind of people do this? I didn't answer. Because I already knew. Professionals. The kind who prepare. The kind who build profiles. The kind who never leave outcomes to chance. The kind who destroy lives systematically. And as I studied the board, another realization hit me. This investigation wasn't created by Ivonne. Not all of it. The handwriting was wrong. Different style. Different ink. Different structure. Someone else had built this section. Someone unknown. Someone whose name never appeared. Yet. Then I saw the file. A black folder. Labeled. Subject, Warren Mitchell. I opened it. And immediately wished I hadn't. The first page contained a psychological evaluation. Not mine. A fabricated one. Fake. Completely fake. Yet detailed. Professional. Convincing. The conclusion sat highlighted near the bottom. Early signs of cognitive decline. I stared. Then flipped the page. More reports. More evaluations. More observations. All fake. All carefully written. All designed to create a narrative. An old man losing his mind. An old widower becoming unstable. An old father unfit to manage his affairs. Suddenly everything clicked. The nursing home. The power of attorney. The funeral confrontation. The lies. The accusations. This wasn't improvisation. It was a plan. A long-term plan. Months. Maybe years in development. They weren't reacting to Yvonne's death. They'd been preparing for it. Waiting for it. Counting on it. And once she was gone, they intended to remove me next. Legally. Quietly. Permanently. Victor pointed toward another page. I read it. Then felt genuine fear for the first time. Not anger. Not suspicion. Fear. Because attached to the report was a court filing draft. Prepared but not submitted. The date field was blank. Everything else completed. Petitioner. Savannah Mitchell. Purpose. Emergency guardianship hearing. Requested outcome. Immediate transfer of Warren Mitchell to assisted care due to diminished mental capacity. My hands clenched. This wasn't a possibility. It was a countdown. The paperwork was ready. The evidence fabricated. The narrative prepared. All they needed was timing. And after the funeral, they believed they finally had it. Then Victor found something else. A sealed envelope. Hidden beneath the folder. My name written on the front. Again. Yvonne's handwriting. I swallowed hard. Even after everything, she still had more to tell me. I carefully opened it. Inside was a single page. Only 3 sentences. Nothing else. I read them once. Then again. Then a third time. Because I couldn't believe what I was reading. Warren, if you've found the hidden room, it means you're closer than I ever got. The person helping Savannah is someone we've known for over 20 years. I froze. 20 years? Impossible. My eyes moved to the final line. And suddenly the warehouse seemed to tilt around me. Because Yvonne had written, "You're looking in the wrong direction." Then beneath it, one final name. A name that made my heart stop. A name I trusted completely. A name I would have defended without hesitation. A name that had been beside our family for decades. Victor. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The paper trembled in my hands. Not because I was 73. Because the name at the bottom had just shattered one of the few things I still believed in. Victor. I read it again, hoping somehow the letters would rearrange themselves. They didn't. Victor. My neighbor. My friend. The man who taught Terrence how to throw a baseball. The man who sat beside me during chemo appointments. The man who drove me home after Yvonne's surgeries. The man who handed me the envelope at the cemetery. Victor. No. It didn't make sense. Nothing about it made sense. Yet neither did the warehouse. Neither did the hospital footage. Neither did Savannah. My entire life had become a puzzle where every answer created 2 new questions. Slowly I looked up. Victor stood less than 6 feet away. Watching me. Waiting. Completely unaware of what I had just read. Or at least, that's what I hoped. His expression looked normal. Concerned. Tired. Curious. The same expression I'd seen 1,000 times. But now something horrible had happened. A seed of doubt had been planted. And once doubt enters your mind, everything changes. Every smile. Every word. Every memory. Everything becomes evidence. Everything becomes suspicious. What is it? Victor asked. His voice sounded normal. Too normal. I folded the paper immediately. Forced my face to stay calm. Nothing. The lie came easier than I expected. Years ago, when I worked investigations, I learned something important. The first person you confront is rarely the right person. And the first theory is often wrong. If Yvonne taught me anything, it was patience. So I smiled. Not a real smile. Just enough. Just another note from Yvonne. Victor nodded. Then looked away. The moment passed. At least on the surface. Inside my head, nothing had passed. Everything had changed. The drive home felt strange. Victor talked occasionally. Small talk. Weather. Traffic. Neighborhood gossip. Normal things. But I barely listened. I was studying him. Analyzing him. Looking for cracks. Signs. Anything. And that bothered me. Because the more I watched, the less guilty he appeared. No nervous behavior. No unusual reactions. No slips. No inconsistencies. Nothing. If Victor was involved, he was extraordinarily good. Or completely innocent. Unfortunately, both possibilities remained equally terrifying. That night I didn't sleep. Not even close. I sat in Yvonne's study until sunrise. Reviewing files. Reviewing photographs. Reviewing timelines. The deeper I dug, the more one detail bothered me. Victor appeared repeatedly throughout the evidence. But never as a suspect. Never. He appeared as a witness. A helper. An observer. Someone close to the family. Nothing more. Which raised another question. If Ivonne believed Victor was involved, why hadn't she built a case against him? Why wasn't there a board? A folder? Evidence? There was nothing. Just a single handwritten warning. And Ivonne wasn't careless. She never accused people without proof. Never. So why leave only a name? The answer hit me around 3 in the morning. Because maybe it wasn't an accusation. Maybe it was a clue. A direction. A warning about something connected to Victor. Not necessarily Victor himself. That possibility felt more like Ivonne. More logical. More careful. Still, I couldn't ignore it. Not anymore. Around 7:30 my phone rang. Terrence. Dad? His voice sounded rushed. Almost panicked. Immediately my instincts activated. What's wrong? Silence. Then, she's filed paperwork. I sat upright. What paperwork? Another pause. Longer this time. When he finally spoke, his voice carried disbelief. Guardianship papers. My stomach dropped. Already? She what? I found them this morning. My grip tightened around the phone. Savannah wasn't waiting. She wasn't hesitating. She was accelerating. Exactly like someone working against a deadline. Exactly like someone afraid. Terrence sounded shaken. I thought it was a mistake. He exhaled heavily. But she already hired attorneys. The room suddenly felt smaller. Because this wasn't preparation anymore. This was execution. The plan had entered its final phase. And that meant we were running out of time. Fast. 2 hours later, I watched Savannah arrive at my house. Alone. Which immediately made me suspicious. Predators rarely travel alone when they think they're vulnerable. The moment she stepped out of her Mercedes, I noticed something different. Confidence. Not the confidence she usually projected. Real confidence. The confidence of someone who believes they've already won. I opened the door before she could knock. She smiled. Sweet. Polite. Artificial. Good morning, Warren. Morning. For several seconds neither of us moved. Then she stepped inside. Like she owned the place. That annoyed me more than I expected. Especially because Ivonne had loved this house. Every corner contained her fingerprints. Her memories. Her life. And Savannah walked through it like a future landlord inspecting property. She sat in the living room. Crossed her legs. Smiled again. I wanted to check on you. Lie. That's thoughtful. Another smile. I know how difficult grief can be. Lie. Everything she said felt rehearsed. Prepared. Calculated. Then she made her move. So. She glanced around the room. Have you thought about the assisted living facility? There it was. The real reason she came. Not concern. Not compassion. Control. I shrugged. Maybe. Her eyes brightened immediately. Interesting. Very interesting. Because she hadn't expected cooperation. She'd expected resistance. And resistance would have helped her. Resistance would have strengthened the narrative. The unstable old man. The angry widower. The difficult father-in-law. Instead, I was giving her something else. Uncertainty. And uncertainty makes manipulators uncomfortable. For the next 20 minutes I played a role. The role she'd written for me. Confused. Forgetful. Distracted. Harmless. Every assumption she had about me. I encouraged. Every stereotype she believed. I fed. At one point I even pretended to forget the year. Her eyes practically sparkled. She was documenting everything mentally. Building her case. Strengthening her story. And while she watched me, I watched her. Carefully. Professionally. The bloodhound wasn't interested in her words. Only her reactions. And eventually, I got one. A mistake. Tiny. But important. She mentioned Preston. Casually. Too casually. The way people mention someone they've rehearsed not mentioning. You know Preston's helping Terrence with investors. There. The slight hesitation. Barely visible. But enough. Enough for someone trained to spot deception. I nodded. Seems like a nice fellow. Savannah smiled. Then made a fatal mistake. A mistake most liars make eventually. She added unnecessary information. Oh, he flew to Chicago yesterday. Interesting. Very interesting. Because according to the anonymous photo I'd received, Preston had been in Atlanta less than 24 hours ago. Why lie? Why create distance? Unless she didn't want anyone knowing they were meeting. The bloodhound quietly filed that away. Eventually she stood to leave. Mission accomplished. Or so she thought. As she reached the front door, she turned back. And for the first time, the mask slipped. Only for a second. Only a tiny crack. But it was there. Coldness. Pure coldness. Then she smiled again. Warren. Yeah? Her voice softened. Almost gentle. You should stop digging. Every muscle in my body froze. The room seemed to go silent. Because I hadn't told her I was digging. Nobody had. Not Terrence. Not Victor. Nobody. Yet somehow. She knew. The smile remained on her face. But her eyes didn't smile. Not even a little. Then she walked out. Leaving me standing there. Heart pounding. Mind racing. One question repeating over and over. How did she know? 10 minutes later, I got my answer. Or at least part of it. My security system alerted me to motion near the backyard fence. I checked the camera feed. And immediately felt my stomach drop. A man stood near the property line. Watching my house through binoculars. Not hiding. Not sneaking. Watching. Professionally. Patiently. Like he'd done it before. The image zoomed automatically. The camera captured his face. And the moment I recognized him, a much larger piece of the puzzle snapped into place. Because the man watching my house wasn't a stranger. He wasn't one of Preston's employees. He wasn't a private investigator. He wasn't law enforcement. He was the same man from the hospital footage. The man who met Savannah the night before Yvonne's condition suddenly worsened. And now, he was watching me. The face wouldn't leave my mind. I stared at the surveillance image on my computer screen while rain tapped softly against the windows. The man by the fence. The man from the hospital. The man who somehow appeared in both places at exactly the wrong moments. At first, I thought he was security. Then private intelligence. Then maybe an investigator hired by Preston. I was wrong. Very wrong. Because 30 minutes later, after running every search I could think of, I finally got a match. And the result made my stomach turn. Not because I recognized him. Because I recognized the case. The screen displayed a faded government photograph from 23 years earlier. A corruption investigation. An investigation I had personally worked. An investigation I had never forgotten. The man's name wasn't listed. His face wasn't the main subject. He appeared only in the background. Standing beside a federal building. Watching. Waiting. Almost invisible. The kind of person most investigators would have ignored. But I didn't ignore details. Never had. That's why people called me the Bloodhound. And suddenly memories came flooding back. 23 years earlier, I'd been investigating a financial network moving money through charities, shell corporations, and healthcare providers. At first it looked ordinary. Tax fraud. Money laundering. Corporate theft. The usual. Then the numbers stopped making sense. Millions disappeared. Then reappeared. Then disappeared again. Accounts connected to politicians. Developers. Executives. Hospital administrators. The deeper I dug, the more resistance I encountered. Files vanished. Witnesses changed stories. Evidence disappeared. Then one afternoon my supervisor called me into his office, closed the door, and told me something I'd never heard before. Drop it. No explanation. No discussion. No appeal. Just drop it. I argued. For an hour. Maybe longer. It didn't matter. The case disappeared. The files vanished. The investigation died. Officially. But not in my head. Because good investigators hate unfinished puzzles. And that case had haunted me for years. Now it was back. Somehow. And the man watching my house had been standing on its edge all along. I printed the photograph. Placed it beside the hospital image. Same jawline. Same eyes. Older now. Heavier. But unmistakably the same person. A professional. Someone trained to stay unnoticed. Someone comfortable operating in shadows. Not a random criminal. Not a hired thug. Something else. Something worse. Because random criminals don't survive 23 years without leaving records. This man had practically erased himself. And people don't erase themselves unless they're hiding something. Or protecting something. The phone rang. Victor. For a second, I hesitated. The note with his name still sat on my desk. I hadn't forgotten. Not even close. But I answered. Hello? Warren. His voice sounded rushed. You need to get down here. My pulse quickened. The warehouse? Now. What happened? Silence. Then. Someone broke in. I made the drive in record time. The entire way, one thought repeated itself. We'd been discovered. The anonymous messages. The surveillance. Savannah somehow knowing I was investigating. Now the warehouse. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Somebody knew. Maybe not everything. But enough. When I arrived, police lights flashed across the wet pavement. My stomach tightened. 2 patrol cars. 1 detective. Crime scene tape. Not good. Not good at all. Victor stood near the entrance. Arms folded. Face pale. That scared me more than the police. Because Victor rarely looked shaken. Even after military service. Even after losing his wife years ago. But tonight. He looked genuinely disturbed. What happened? He pointed toward the warehouse. Go see. The damage wasn't random. That was the first thing I noticed. Nothing valuable had been stolen. Computers remained untouched. Equipment remained untouched. The investigation boards remained untouched. Which meant this wasn't theft. It was a message. Someone had entered the warehouse knowing exactly what they wanted. And exactly where to find it. The hidden room. The secret room. The room containing the second investigation board. My investigation board. The fake guardianship documents. Everything. Gone. Every file. Every photograph. Every note. Gone. Professionally removed. Not torn apart. Not destroyed. Removed. As if the intruder had a checklist. As if they knew exactly where everything was. My blood ran cold. Because only a few people knew that room existed. Ivonne. Maybe. Whoever built it. And now. Someone else. Someone very dangerous. Then I saw the wall. A single sentence spray-painted across the concrete. Large black letters. Fresh paint still dripping. The detective was photographing it. Victor was staring at it. I froze. Because the message wasn't directed at police. Or Savannah. Or Preston. It was directed at me. It read. She didn't tell you everything. That's all. 6 words. Yet somehow they felt heavier than every piece of evidence we'd uncovered. Because deep down, I already feared it was true. That night I couldn't stop thinking about Ivonne. Not the investigation. Not Savannah. Not Preston. Ivonne. The warehouse proved something I hadn't wanted to admit. My wife had been carrying secrets. Big secrets. And maybe she'd hidden some of them from me intentionally. Not because she didn't love me. Because she was protecting something. Or someone. The question was who. Around midnight I started reviewing old family photographs. Not evidence. Just memories. I needed a break. Needed to remember who we were before all this madness. Before cancer. Before conspiracies. Before Savannah. Photo after photo passed beneath my fingers. Birthdays. Vacations. Christmas mornings. Terrence growing up. Little League games. Graduations. Normal life. Good life. Then I found something strange. A photograph I'd never paid attention to before. Taken 21 years earlier. At a charity fundraiser. The image showed me. Ivonne. Terrence. Several guests. Nothing unusual. Until I looked at the background. A man stood near the stage. Partially obscured. Watching the crowd. Watching us. My pulse stopped. Because I recognized him immediately. The same man. The hospital man. The watcher. 21 years younger. Standing less than 30 feet from my family. My hands trembled. No. That wasn't possible. It couldn't be. Yet there he was. Plain as day. Which meant this wasn't new. This wasn't about Savannah alone. This wasn't about the patent alone. This wasn't even about Yvonne's illness alone. Whatever this was. It had roots stretching back decades. Long before Savannah entered our lives. Long before Terrence became successful. Long before any of this. And suddenly a horrifying possibility entered my mind. What if Savannah wasn't the architect? What if she was just the latest piece? I spent the next hour digging through old photographs. Family albums. Event pictures. Community gatherings. Anything. And the more I searched, the worse it became. Because I found him again. And again. And again. Always distant. Always in the background. Always watching. A church fundraiser. A school event. A neighborhood picnic. 20 years of photographs. 20 years of appearances. 20 years of observation. Someone had been watching our family for decades. And we never noticed. Not once. At 1:37 a.m., another anonymous message arrived. No greeting. No explanation. Just an address. And one sentence. Ask Victor what happened there in 1998. I stared at the screen. Then at the address. My pulse immediately accelerated. Because I knew that address. Very well. It was the location of an abandoned office building downtown. The same building where my corruption investigation had abruptly ended 23 years earlier. The same building connected to the case I was ordered to abandon. The same building connected to the mysterious watcher. And now, apparently connected to Victor. I leaned back in my chair, trying to process it. Because once again, everything seemed to point in two directions at the same time. Toward Victor. And away from him. Toward guilt. And away from guilt. Exactly the kind of confusion a skilled operator creates. Which meant one thing. Someone wanted me chasing the wrong target. The question was why? And who benefited if I turned against Victor? Before I could answer, another message arrived. This one wasn't anonymous. It came directly from Savannah. Only 4 words. But they sent a chill down my spine. See you at court. Attached was a PDF. Emergency guardianship hearing. Scheduled for 48 hours later. And according to the paperwork, 2 medical professionals were prepared to testify that I was mentally incompetent. One of the names made my blood run cold. Because the doctor listed as a witness wasn't a doctor at all. It was the man from the hospital. The man from my old IRS case. The man who had been watching my family for over 20 years. And somehow, he was about to swear under oath that I was losing my mind. The moment I walked back into Yvonne's warehouse, I stopped thinking like a grieving husband. I started thinking like the bloodhound. For weeks, Savannah believed she was controlling the board. Every move, every conversation, every decision. She thought I was reacting, following, trying to keep up. What she didn't realize was something every good investigator understands. The best trap is the one your target walks into willingly. And Savannah was practically running toward hers. I stood in front of the evidence wall and studied everything Ivonne had collected. Bank transfers, property records, text messages, photographs, corporate filings. At first glance, it looked overwhelming. But buried inside the mountain of information was one simple truth. Savannah wasn't nearly as smart as she thought she was. She was greedy. And greed makes people predictable. Every single time. The more I reviewed her transactions, the clearer the pattern became. She wasn't just stealing from Terrence. She was rushing. Moving money too quickly. Making transfers before documents were finalized. Creating shell accounts before ownership changed. She was acting like someone terrified of running out of time. That told me something important. Savannah knew the window was closing. Which meant she planned to make her final move soon. Very soon. Exactly what I was hoping for. Because desperate criminals make mistakes. Big mistakes. The next morning, I called Terrence. He sounded exhausted. Like a man carrying a burden he couldn't explain. Dad? How much access does Savannah have to the patent files? A long silence followed. Then, too much. I expected that answer. What about company accounts? Another pause. Same. I leaned back in my chair. There it was. The opening. The weakness. The place where everything could fall apart. Or come together. Terrence, I need you to do exactly what I say. His voice immediately changed. The way it used to when he was a kid and knew I was serious. What are you planning? I smiled. Not because I was happy. Because for the first time in weeks, I could see the finish line. I'm giving Savannah exactly what she wants. 3 days later, Savannah received the news she'd been waiting for. A confidential email. Apparently leaked from inside Terrence's company. According to the documents, ownership of the medical patent was about to be transferred into a holding company. A company vulnerable to acquisition. A company vulnerable to theft. A company containing everything she wanted. The bait was perfect. Because it wasn't real. Not one piece of it. Every document had been created specifically for her. Specifically for Preston. Specifically for the people trying to steal my son's future. And within 6 hours, they took it. Exactly as expected. Victor called me that evening. You were right. I wasn't surprised. How fast? Victor laughed. A cold laugh. The fake files were downloaded 17 minutes after delivery. 17. Not days. Not hours. Minutes. Which meant somebody inside Savannah's circle was monitoring everything. Watching. Waiting. Panicking. Perfect. That was exactly what I needed. Because every illegal download, every unauthorized access, every transfer attempt, every communication, was being recorded, logged, tracked, and forwarded to federal investigators. For the first time since Ivonne's funeral, I slept well. Not because the danger was gone. Because the hunt was almost over. Savannah believed she was stealing a fortune. What she was really stealing was evidence. Evidence that would bury her. Evidence she personally collected with her own hands. And the best part? She had absolutely no idea. The following afternoon, another surprise arrived. A court notice. The guardianship hearing. The hearing Savannah planned to use to declare me mentally incompetent. The hearing where she intended to take control of my property. My finances. My future. I stared at the document for several seconds. Then I laughed. Actually laughed. Because Savannah had unknowingly scheduled her own destruction. The hearing would happen in 4 days. The exact same day as Atlanta's largest biotech investment gala. The exact same gala where Preston planned to unveil Terrence's stolen patent. The exact same gala where Savannah expected to celebrate her victory. Instead, it was about to become a public execution. Not literal. Professional. Financial. Legal. The kind that hurts far more. That night, I sat on the porch holding one of Yvonne's old photographs. The same smile. The same eyes. The same strength. And for the first time since she died, I felt close to her again. Because I finally understood what she'd been trying to tell me. This was never about revenge. It was about protection. Protecting Terrence. Protecting the future. Protecting the family she'd spent 45 years building. And now it was my turn. I looked at her picture and smiled. Almost there, sweetheart. The wind rustled softly through the rose bushes. And somehow, for the first time in weeks, I felt like she heard me. But while I was preparing my final move, Savannah was preparing hers. Because that same night, across town, she sat inside Preston's penthouse staring at a document that made her eyes widen. A federal subpoena. One that should never have existed. One that threatened everything. And for the first time since this began, Savannah felt something she hadn't felt in years. Fear. Real fear. Because she was finally starting to realize something. The old man she mocked at a funeral wasn't the man she thought he was. And by the time she understood exactly who Warren Mitchell really was, it would already be too late. The funny thing about greedy people is this. The moment they realize they're losing control, they stop thinking clearly. And Savannah was losing control fast. For weeks, she'd been confident. Arrogant. Certain she had every angle covered. But now strange things were happening. Federal subpoenas. Unexpected audits. Frozen transactions. Questions from investors. Questions Preston couldn't answer. Questions nobody should have been asking. And deep down, Savannah knew exactly what it meant. Someone was coming for them. The night before the gala, she made a mistake. A huge mistake. She broke into my house. Not because she wanted money. Not because she wanted jewelry. She wanted information. Evidence. Proof. Something she could use before everything collapsed. Unfortunately for her, I was expecting it. Every room in that house was under surveillance. Every entry point. Every hallway. Every office. The bloodhound might have been retired. But he wasn't rusty. Just after midnight, my phone buzzed. Motion detected. Office door. I opened the camera feed. There she was. Savannah. Dressed in black. Gloves on. Moving through my house like a thief. Because that's exactly what she was. A thief who finally ran out of places to steal from. I watched her tear through filing cabinets. Open drawers. Search shelves. Even pull books from bookcases. The desperation in her movements was obvious. She wasn't looking for something specific anymore. She was looking for anything. Any clue. Any advantage. Any miracle. Because for the first time, she was scared. Then she found the envelope. The envelope I'd left for her. Exactly where I wanted her to find it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Nothing more. Nothing less. She opened it. Read the message. And instantly went pale. Because written across the page were 6 simple words. I know everything, Savannah. She read it twice. Then 3 times. Then she started shaking. Not dramatically. Just enough. Enough to tell me the truth. Guilty people fear certainty. And Savannah suddenly believed I had it. The next morning, Victor and I reviewed the footage together. He watched Savannah's reaction and whistled. She's terrified. I nodded. Good. Because fear creates pressure. And pressure creates mistakes. And mistakes create evidence. By noon, the calls started. Preston calling Savannah. Savannah calling lawyers. Lawyers calling accountants. Accountants calling banks. Everybody scrambling. Everybody nervous. everybody trying to understand what was happening. Meanwhile, I sat on my porch drinking coffee. Exactly where Savannah expected me to be. The harmless old man. The retired postal worker. The grieving widower. The perfect disguise. Then the guardianship hearing arrived. The moment Savannah had been waiting for. The moment she thought would finish me. The courthouse was crowded. Lawyers. Clerks. Observers. And Savannah walked in smiling. Confident. Certain. She even wore the same designer outfit she'd worn at Yvonne's funeral. Almost like she considered this another victory celebration. That choice would come back to haunt her. When the judge entered, Savannah's attorney immediately began presenting their case. They had reports. Statements. Evaluations. Witnesses. According to them, I was confused. Forgetful. Unstable. Unable to manage my affairs. Unable to live independently. The picture they painted was almost impressive. If I didn't know better, I might have believed it myself. Then the judge looked at me. Mr. Mitchell, do you wish to respond? I stood slowly, adjusted my glasses, and walked to the center of the courtroom. The room became quiet. Very quiet. Because until that moment, everyone expected me to mumble something emotional. Something confused. Something that proved their case. Instead, I placed 3 folders on the judge's desk. Then 3 more. Then 3 more. The judge raised an eyebrow. What are these? I smiled. Evidence. The smile disappeared from Savannah's face immediately. For the next 30 minutes, the courtroom transformed. Not into a guardianship hearing. Into an investigation. Bank records appeared. Audio recordings appeared. Video footage appeared. Emails appeared. Property transfers appeared. And with every new document, Savannah's attorney became quieter. And quieter. And quieter. Until eventually he stopped speaking altogether. Then came the recording. The one that ended everything. The recording from my living room. The day Savannah tried forcing me to sign power of attorney papers. Her own voice filled the courtroom. Threatening. Manipulating. Lying. Confessing without realizing it. Every word crystal clear. Every word undeniable. The judge's expression hardened instantly. The courtroom atmosphere changed. People stopped looking at me. They started looking at Savannah. And when that happens, you know the tide has turned. The hearing ended in less than 10 minutes after that. The guardianship petition was dismissed. Completely. But that wasn't the real victory. The real victory came when the judge referred the matter for criminal investigation. The look on Savannah's face was worth every sleepless night. Outside the courthouse, reporters had already gathered. Questions flew from every direction. Cameras everywhere. Microphones everywhere. Savannah tried leaving through a side entrance. Didn't work. People were asking questions now. The kind of questions she couldn't answer. The kind that destroy reputations. But the biggest shock came later that afternoon. Because Terrence finally saw the evidence. All of it. Not pieces. Not fragments. Everything. The recordings. The transfers. The forged signatures. The secret accounts. The communications with Preston. Every ugly detail. For nearly an hour he sat silently in my living room. Reading. Listening. Thinking. And the longer he sat there, the more his face changed. Confusion became disbelief. Disbelief became anger. Anger became heartbreak. Because discovering your spouse betrayed you is one thing. Discovering they planned it for years is something else entirely. Finally he looked up. His eyes red. His voice barely above a whisper. Mom knew? I nodded. Slowly. Yeah. The room fell silent again. Then Terrence smiled sadly. A smile that looked exactly like Yvonne's. Of course she did. That evening, Atlanta's biggest biotech gala began. Investors arrived. Executives arrived. Reporters arrived. Preston arrived. Savannah arrived. Everyone expecting a celebration. Everyone expecting an announcement that would make headlines. And technically, they were right. The gala was about to make headlines. Just not the kind anyone expected. As Victor drove me toward the event, I adjusted my tie. The same tie I wore at my wedding. The same tie Ivonne always said made me look respectable. Victor glanced over. Nervous? I smiled. Not even a little. Because after weeks of lies, weeks of manipulation, weeks of watching people underestimate me, the time for patience was over. The time for evidence was over. The time for warnings was over. Tonight, everything ends. And inside the ballroom, Savannah was standing beside Preston when a federal agent quietly entered through the main doors. Then another. Then another. Then another. Either of them noticed. Not yet. But within minutes. Their entire world was about to collapse. The ballroom was packed. Atlanta's biggest investors. Technology executives. Medical researchers. Political donors. Reporters. Cameras. Millions of dollars sitting in one room. Everyone dressed in expensive suits and evening gowns. Everyone expecting to witness the rise of the next biotech giant. No one came expecting a public disaster. Especially not Savannah. Especially not Preston. Preston stood confidently on stage. Perfect smile. Perfect suit. Perfect performance. The kind of man who spent years convincing people he was smarter than everyone else. He adjusted the microphone and began talking about innovation. Vision. The future. Opportunity. All the usual buzzwords rich people love hearing. The crowd nodded politely. Investors smiled. Everything was going according to plan. At least that's what Preston thought. Then the giant screen behind him flickered. Once. Twice. 3 times. Preston stopped talking. Confused. The audience turned. A technician near the stage frowned. Something clearly wasn't supposed to happen. Then the first document appeared. A bank transfer. Large. Suspicious. Illegal. And directly connected to Preston. The room went silent. Not completely. But close. The kind of silence that spreads one person at a time. People stopped drinking. Stopped talking. Stopped smiling. Because suddenly the presentation wasn't about success. It was about evidence. Preston laughed nervously. Looks like we're having technical difficulties. Nobody laughed with him. Because the next document appeared. Then another. Then another. Shell companies. Fraudulent contracts. Hidden accounts. Offshore transfers. Each one worse than the last. Each one connected to him. I watched from the back of the ballroom. Calm. Quiet. Patient. Exactly where I wanted to be. Victor stood beside me. Arms crossed. Enjoying every second. Then Savannah noticed me. Our eyes met across the room. And for the first time since Yvonne's funeral, I saw fear. Real fear. Not concern. Not worry. Fear. Because she finally understood. The old man she mocked. The old man she tried to throw away. Was destroying her life in real time. The screens changed again. This time the audience heard audio. Savannah's voice. Clear as crystal. Talking about forged signatures. Talking about ownership transfers. Talking about removing me from the house. Talking about taking control of Terrence's assets. The entire room listened. Every word. Every lie. Every scheme. Every betrayal. Someone gasped. Someone else cursed. A woman near the front shook her head in disgust. Because greed is ugly. But hearing it spoken aloud? That's even uglier. Savannah rushed toward the stage. Panicked. Desperate. She grabbed a microphone. This isn't real. Big mistake. Huge mistake. Because panic makes people say things they shouldn't. And Savannah was panicking hard. A reporter immediately shouted. Then why is it your voice? Another shouted. Did you forge the documents? Another. Are you under federal investigation? Questions started flying everywhere. Fast. Aggressive. Relentless. The crowd smelled blood. And crowds love a downfall. Especially when arrogance is involved. Meanwhile, Preston looked like a man watching his future disappear. Because he understood something Savannah didn't. The evidence was real. All of it. And he knew exactly how much trouble they were in. Then the ballroom doors opened. Federal agents entered. Not one. Not two. 8. The room froze. Every conversation stopped. Every camera turned. Every eye followed them. One of the agents approached the stage. Badge visible. Expression cold. Professional. The kind of expression that says, "This isn't a discussion. This is the end." Preston immediately tried distancing himself. Classic coward move. He pointed toward Savannah. She handled those transactions. Savannah spun around. What? Preston pointed again. She did. The betrayal happened so fast it almost felt funny. Almost. Savannah stared at him. Completely stunned. Because in her mind they were partners. A team. But criminals rarely stay loyal when prison enters the conversation. Then everything exploded. Not physically. Emotionally. Savannah started screaming. Preston started blaming. Lawyers started whispering. Investors started leaving. Reporters started recording. And the agents kept moving forward. Calm. Methodical. Certain. I took a slow breath. Because after weeks of planning, weeks of waiting, weeks of pretending, it was finally happening. Justice. Not revenge. Justice. There's a difference. A very important difference. Then something unexpected happened. Terrence walked onto the stage. The room immediately quieted. Because unlike Savannah and Preston, Terrence still had credibility. People respected him. Trusted him. Believed him. He looked exhausted. Heartbroken. But determined. And suddenly I saw Ivonne in him. The same strength. The same dignity. The same refusal to back down. Terrence took the microphone. His voice steady. I'd like to make something clear. The room listened. Every person. Every camera. Every reporter. The patent being discussed tonight was never for sale. A ripple moved through the audience. Terrence continued. It was created to help patients. Pause. It was not created to make dishonest people rich. The crowd erupted in applause. Not everyone. But enough. Enough to matter. Because people recognize integrity when they see it. And they just watched greed collide with integrity. Greed lost. Badly. Then Terrence reached into his jacket. Pulled out an envelope. And turned toward Savannah. She immediately looked confused. Then nervous. Then terrified. Because she recognized it. Divorce papers. The room practically stopped breathing. Savannah looked down. Then back up. Then down again. As if reality itself had become difficult to process. Terrence's voice cracked slightly. Not from weakness. From pain. Because despite everything, he had loved her. That's the cruel part about betrayal. The love was real. At least for one person. I'm done. Just 2 words. Simple. Final. Absolute. I'm done. Savannah looked around desperately. Searching for help. For support. For allies. But everyone was gone. Preston had abandoned her. The investors had abandoned her. The reporters were exposing her. The agents were investigating her. And Terrence was leaving her. For the first time in her life. There was nobody left to manipulate. Nobody left to use. Nobody left to control. Only consequences. As federal agents escorted Preston away, he glanced toward me. Angry. Humiliated. Broken. I simply nodded. Nothing more. No speech. No celebration. No gloating. Because winning doesn't require noise. Sometimes silence says everything. Then Savannah looked at me. And for a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Because beneath the designer clothes, beneath the arrogance, beneath the lies, was a woman who destroyed her own life. Not because she lacked opportunity. Because she lacked character. And that's a choice. Always a choice. She opened her mouth. Maybe to apologize. Maybe to blame someone. Maybe to beg. I'll never know. Because at that exact moment, federal agents stepped forward and placed her under arrest. The ballroom erupted again. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Investors whispered. The story was already spreading across Atlanta. And by morning, it would be national news. I stood quietly near the back, watching it all end. Watching months of planning come together. Watching Yvonne's final mission succeed. And for the first time since her funeral, I felt peace. Real peace. Then Victor leaned closer, smiling. You know what's funny? What? He laughed. The whole city thinks you were a retired postal worker. I smiled. So do I. But the night wasn't over. Because after the arrests, after the scandal, after the reporters, Terrence approached me. And what he said next hit harder than anything else that happened that evening. Dad? His eyes filled with tears. Mom left something for us. And suddenly, one final secret remained. The ballroom was finally quiet. Most of the reporters had left. The federal agents were gone. Preston was in custody. Savannah was facing charges. And for the first time in weeks, nobody was chasing us. Nobody was lying to us. Nobody was trying to steal from us. The fight was over. At least the legal fight. The emotional one was just beginning. Terrence and I sat together in my living room later that night. The same living room where Ivonne used to watch old movies. The same couch where she'd fall asleep halfway through a film and insist she was still awake. The same room that somehow felt both full of memories and painfully empty at the same time. A small envelope sat on the coffee table between us. Yvonne's handwriting covered the front. My boys. Just those two words. My boys. And suddenly either of us wanted to open it. Because once we did, there wouldn't be any more messages. No more clues. No more recordings. No more surprises. This would be the last time we'd hear from her. Terrence finally took a deep breath. I can't do it. I understood. Because I felt exactly the same way. For a moment, we just sat there. Looking at the envelope. Remembering. Missing her. Then I picked it up. Carefully opened it. And unfolded the letter. The room became completely silent. Even the grandfather clock in the hallway seemed quieter somehow. Then I began reading. My boys. Immediately, Terrence looked away. His eyes filled with tears. Mine weren't much better. Because it sounded exactly like her. Warm. Gentle. Strong. If you're reading this, it means the truth finally came out. And if the truth came out, it means you both survived. That was always my biggest prayer. I stopped for a second. Swallowed hard. Then continued. Warren, if you're reading this, I know exactly what you're doing. A small smile appeared on my face. Of course she did. She always knew. You're pretending you're fine. You're probably drinking coffee. And you're probably refusing to admit how much you miss me. Terrence laughed through his tears. I did too. Because she was right. Every single word. Then the letter continued. Terrence, your father spent his entire life protecting us. You may never fully understand how many sacrifices he made. But I hope one day you appreciate them the way I do. I looked over at my son. He couldn't even speak. He simply nodded. Then came the part that broke both of us. And Warren, thank you for giving me the safest, happiest life a woman could ask for. If I had the chance to do it all again, I'd choose you every single time. My vision blurred. For a moment I couldn't continue. 45 years. 45 beautiful years. And somehow that sentence hurt more than the funeral. Because now she was talking directly to me. One last time. Terence quietly placed a hand on my shoulder. Neither of us said anything. We didn't need to. After a moment, I continued reading. Now listen carefully. The two of you have wasted enough time being stubborn. That made us both laugh. Because if there was one thing Ivonne loved doing, it was calling us out. Terence, forgive yourself. Warren, forgive him. Neither of you is perfect. Neither of you ever will be. But your family. The room fell silent again. Because she was right. There had been distance. Misunderstandings. Things left unsaid. Not because we didn't love each other. Because life gets busy. And people assume they'll always have more time. Until they don't. Then came the final page. The last part. The part neither of us was ready for. When this is over, don't spend your lives looking backward. Don't let pain become your identity. Don't let betrayal make you bitter. The world already has enough bitter people. I stared at those words. Long after I finished reading them. Because they felt less like advice. And more like instructions. Then came her final sentence. The last words she would ever leave us. Plant new roses. Life always grows back. I love you both. That was it. The end. No hidden clue. No secret account. No final mystery. Just love. Pure, simple love. Exactly the way Ivonne lived. Neither of us spoke for a long time. We simply sat there. Remembering her. Smiling. Crying. Healing. A few months later, life looked very different. Terence regained complete control of his company. The stolen patent became one of the most successful medical technologies in the country. The people who tried to steal it were held accountable. Preston lost everything. Savannah faced the consequences of her choices. Justice arrived exactly where it belonged. As for me, I went back to my porch. Back to my coffee. Back to my cardigan. Back to the simple life I always loved. The bloodhound returned to retirement. For good this time. At least that's what I tell people. Every morning, I walk into the backyard. And every morning, I stop beside the rose garden. The old roses are still there. But now there are new ones too. Terence helped me plant them. Just like his mother asked. Sometimes we sit out there together. Talking. Laughing. Remembering. And every now and then, when the wind moves through the flowers just right, I can almost hear her voice. Telling us we're doing fine. Telling us to keep going. Telling us not to waste the time we have left. Because here's the truth. The lesson hidden inside all of this. Never mistake kindness for weakness. Never mistake age for helplessness. And never underestimate the people who quietly spend their lives protecting the ones they love. Sometimes the strongest person in the family isn't the loudest. Sometimes it's the one nobody notices. The one working quietly in the background. The one making sacrifices nobody ever sees. The one planting seeds whose flowers won't bloom until years later. That was Ivonne. And I was the luckiest man in the world to call her my wife. Today, when people ask about Savannah, Preston, or everything that happened, I usually just smile. Because those people aren't the ending of this story. Family is. Love is. Second chances are. And every time I look at those roses, I remember something my wife once told me. Storms don't last forever, Warren. Just make sure you survive long enough to see the sun again. I did. Terence did. And thanks to her, our family did too.